before it started in 2001, we already had a long history, starting with the first court case in 1973. So we had basically gained a practice between 1985 and 95 that physicians were ending patients' lives and were also reporting it to in an official kind of way. But the legalization was supposed to regulate everything and stop it from growing and so forth. And I think in both goals of the law, stopping the growth in a sense, to pin it down, and to keep unofficial euthanasia out of the practice of physicians and how they did palliation and this sort of thing, that both these goals have not been successful. We see every year new categories growing, different kinds of psychiatric cases where they think it's okay, more tendency to kill people with dementia, etc. So we see it growing, and we see the shortening of life in palliation continues to be an issue, especially the way that terminal sedation is being used in the Netherlands. There is, if you take the figures of the oncology, the Cancer Society, at least 10% of the cases are probably not happening exactly the way they should in terms of palliation. Patients who are killed without consent are always part of the statistic, and that this is where the physician is mostly feeling that it is a kind of deed of compassion. This is the dangerous thing. If killing somebody to relieve their pain becomes good medicine, then why should a physician not do it even if the patient is not capable of expressing their desire to die? So every year there are a few hundred cases in our euthanasia statistic of people who are actually killed without explicit consent. Well, absolutely. There's a huge moral conflict going for people who are involved. You notice that somebody like Theo Boer, who was on one of these testing commissions, comes to a point where he doesn't feel comfortable to be on a testing commission anymore because he's being asked to say okay to something that he doesn't feel comfortable with, and the same holds true for this case that you mentioned of somebody who steps down. Yes, these are people who agree with our euthanasia law, but the practice has become one which they are not comfortable with. If you include the act of killing as one of the tools in the case of the doctor, he naturally grabs for this tool when under duress, because then it becomes good medicine. If it is looked at as a medical procedure, which I say it is not. Killing somebody is not a medical procedure. Medicine is about trying to heal and keep people alive. It's not about killing them. And so if killing becomes part of the toolkit, it's unavoidable that physicians grab to this when they have no alternatives. I think one needs to be careful to sketch an image of a kind of a horrible wave of anxiety, but the truth is that my own grandmother, whose husband, my grandfather, was killed without having given explicit consent with pain medication, especially back then it was with morphine overdose and withholding of fluids. And she was afraid when she went to an old people's home. She chose to go to an old people's home 200 kilometers away from where she had lived all her life. She lived in a 5-kilometer radius all her life, and then when she needed to go to an old people's home, she went 200 kilometers away, amongst other things, to be in a conservative Christian place where she would be sure that they wouldn't kill her. And this is sad. We should not want this fear to be there. More than 50% of all physicians in the Netherlands have done a euthanasia in the last 10 years. And 86% of all physicians would claim to be willing to do a euthanasia. Which means it's an active part of the medical practice of a doctor. Euthanasia. So it's almost ubiquitous, almost all over the place. And the pressure is huge. They rate it as one of the most stressful parts of their career. This thing. And if you ask how to stop it, the only way to stop it is to protect them with the law. It is only when the law says medicine is not about killing people that the doctors are protected. The demand is growing, absolutely. If you look at the requests, now fortunately not all requests are honored. There are something like 6,000 or 7,000 people euthanized in a year in Holland in terms of the formal euthanasia. but there are somewhere between 60 and 70,000 applications for euthanasia per year and growing. And what's noteworthy is that the vast majority of euthanasia requests are existential in nature. That means not I have unbearable pain, but I am afraid of unbearable pain which is coming. And this, and also feeling like you are a burden, or feeling lonely and a burden to your next of kin.